Welcome to the Mid-City Soccer Show. I'm your host, Matt Swift. I have my good buddy and co-host, David Gussler, with me. How are you, sir?
Good, man. Good. I feel really good to be the most qualified person with a microphone here tonight and ready to discuss. I'm joking for context here in about 30 seconds. You guys will find out why, but it feels good. It feels good. I'm good, man.
Nice. We also have our producer and co-host, Corey Insco. He does have a mic. He might say hi. He might pop in. You never know. That's the lovely part of Corey Insco. But Corey, how are you?
I'm good. We got 2 wins to talk about, so I'm excited. But mostly I'm just excited to listen to y'all chat for a little bit.
Well, I think people will be more excited when they know who our guest is and probably hear less of us. Our guest today, he's back on the show. It's been a little bit since he's been here, and that is Will Palaszczuk, a.k.a. Willie P. Willie, my friend, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I was wondering if I'd done anything wrong to tick you guys off or something like that, you know. I mean, phone still works, works both ways, Found out that David's moved since the last time we've talked.
Yeah,
so,
right.
It's fine. It's okay. It's fine. I understand that I got to be a better friend too. That's all good. But having said all of that, it's great to be with you guys and great to be talking, as Corey said, about 2 big wins last week.
Yes.
Yeah, we have lots to cover in this show. We'll jump into some Open Cup. We'll talk about the win against NYCFC. We'll talk about our next matchup in Open Cup a little bit. And then we got a lot of games coming. We also got to talk about Orlando and then answer some of your fan questions. But I guess we can start with the inner city battle that we had, Will, with Charlotte Independence. Kind of a rout, but a good game nonetheless. Very entertaining if you like goals, that is. But let me ask you kind of broad strokes about the match. It's kind of hard to really pull, little things out with such a rout. But what were your kind of overall thoughts on maybe the starting lineup and the match itself?
Well, I know it was a match that a lot of people wanted to see. I personally myself, didn't really take it that way because I know there are a lot of people who kind of cross over between Charlotte FC and Charlotte Independence both, and I'm not begrudging anybody for doing so. I just, I sit there and say, hey, it's another game against a USL Championship or League One side. You don't want to have the inevitable thing that sometimes happens with these clubs and get a cup set. So I'm happy that Charlotte played well. I know that there's some folks who are neutrals out there who are probably upset at the red card and the dog-so nature of it. And I know that there might have been some ambiguity with folks talking about whether or not it was or wasn't. From where I was sitting, I didn't have the best angle of it. I was at the opposite side of the pitch, so I couldn't see from a line of demarcation standpoint whether or not goalkeeper was the last line of defense. I mean, the referee makes the call. He makes the call. There's no VAR. You can't go back and review it. And then, Charlotte ends up getting its sea legs at the end there with a great goal from Archie Goodwin. And then after Independence kind of wears down, you start to see the real quality of the squad. And I think you can pull some positive things from Charlotte FC, even though a lot of, again, their good fortune, it seems like it's a theme this year, a lot of their good fortune took place against the 10-man side. But I think you really saw Rodolfo Loco. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that what he did against Independence earned him the start on the weekend against New York City, but I think we first saw the expansive nature of the kind of quality that he can have, not just with his running ability, not just with his crossing ability, but he's got brute strength, he's got moves in his bag, and I think it's something you look at and say, gives him a different profile than Charlotte really has on that right side than the guys that they've put there. And that's not necessarily saying anything bad about Kerwin Vargas or Liel Abada, because as I'm sure we'll talk about later on, Kerwin Vargas brought out a different kind of spark off the bench against New York City that I don't think he's been able to do in situations against other teams because of some of the work that Rodolfo Loco did early. But I thought that was really great. It was good to see Henry Kessler get back on the pitch, see him score, which I think can be a real great weapon as he starts to get more games familiarity with this club. I thought it was great to get Will Cleary going. I talk a lot with Will Jarrett, who's on the Crown Legacy side, and the thing he keeps talking to me about is that Will Cleary is really, really solid. And I know people were kind of upset about letting Nick Scardina go and maybe not really having an immediate answer at right back off the bench if, say, something happened to Nate, which again, bar the neck injury with Nathan Byrne, you can put that guy in pen for every, MLS match, which is an incredible thing to have. And I think something we might have taken for granted a little bit once we saw the breakdowns defensively that took place last year. But I think Will Cleary is somebody who's definitely getting a lot of solid minutes. It was great to see Bai Kulabala get in there. Great to see Nympha, and I know Nympha has become a bit of a lightning rod for a lot of the fan base. And all I can say is kind of repeat the line that Dean has given, where it's like, look, what is more beneficial for Nimfasha Berkimas at this stage of his career? He's 18 years old. You're not starting him over Wilfred Zaha. You're not starting him over a Kerwin Vargas. I know people are going to say, well, you can start him over Abada. Well, that's, something that gets down into the, nuts and bolts of how do you put a $7-8 million player on the bench, et cetera, and so on. Of course, we didn't see Abada in New York City, which I'm sure we'll get to. But I think the thing that Dean says is that they want to get him full 90s at Crown Legacy as much as possible, because that allows them to really see what he can do as a player, because last year was kind of a lost year for him. He was injured the entire year for most of it.
That's
and
right.
So that part of it, I think, has really been great to see for Charlotte FC. Got to see a couple of other players who haven't gotten a lot of minutes play as well. I think also it was a good rebound for Andrew Privet to get himself back on the pitch. And again, we saw Andrew on Saturday after the Tim Ream injury. But I think all in all, it was exactly what you'd want out of a U.S. Open Cup game against a USL League One side. You got a big lead. You got some guys some minutes. Some of your first team guys got a little bit of a run inside of them, and you didn't jeopardize the weekend, which I think was number one outside of course, obviously winning the game.
You bring up a really good point about Berchimas, because I think people see the talent and the spark there, and then sometimes we have been struggling a little bit on the wing. So that you have this up-and-coming kid that looks great, and you're like, hey, bring him in. But you bring up a really good point. I think people do forget about it. He was injured, right? And so you got to work your way back in. And then again, to your point, like, you got to give him enough minutes so you get a good sample size of, can he go 90 minutes? Is he a 60-minute, type of guy? He just runs himself into the ground. You got to have games under those legs to really see what's going on. So far, he looks great, right? But can that translate up to the first team? So that's some really good points there.
Well, and that's the thing, like, and Dean said it, and I don't know if he necessarily had rabbit ears on this comment, but when we talked to him after the game Wednesday, he literally said, without prodding or prompting, I'm not one to keep a player down. And I found that incredibly fascinating, because I don't think any of us really had said that towards him about Nympha in particular. And, I looked back at the numbers, after Dean gave Nympha his debut in 2024, he played 3 games at the start of that season. And the famous quote that came from him was, if you're good enough, you're old enough. And Charlotte's wing situation, as you may remember, when Dean first got here, wasn't great. It was before we signed Abada. So it was a situation where Charlotte was really trying to kind of figure out some things in terms of where they wanted to go at the wing position. They didn't have Zaha, obviously. And so Nympha was a natural choice to look at, and had a good preseason. And then unfortunately, his numbers at Legacy were not as magnetic and dynamic as you would have thought they would be in 2024. And then 25 comes around. He has the injury early in the season, and you really haven't seen much of him. Most of his great action and great play, unfortunately, has taken place at the international level. And that's not to degrade what that stuff means and what it does. I mean, we saw him at the under-17s and saw what he was able to do for the U.S. Youth National Team. But I think they wanted to see him do it in a Charlotte FC pipeline shirt for the first time. Now, to his credit, he's doing it. But I keep coming back to, you can only roster 20 guys. So it's like, are we going to dress 6 wingers? Like, what are we going to do here? So like, it's, and I know, people are going to get in, what about, this player or that player and Tiger Smalls and all those things. And look, I know you can sit here and prop up or cut down anybody on the roster you want to, but I have no problem with the way that they're handling Nympha specifically, because it gives you a sense of what he actually can be when you start to see more of that sample size, because quite frankly, we haven't seen this from him in a Charlotte uniform until this season.
Yeah.
I don't think it helps either the situation for Ninfa if he was doing all of this without getting sniffed around or like leaked or rumors about European teams sniffing around him. I think people would be like, okay, this is cool, developing youth talent and moving him up slowly and
they
getting
can
him his
sniff
legs,
all they
etc.
want, David.
But
that's the thing.
correct.
They can sniff all they want. From what I understand, there's sniffing going on, but I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that Charlotte want to use the player. Like if there was legitimate sniffing, to put it that way, we wouldn't see Ninfa playing at all.
That's true.
Because you wouldn't want him to get hurt.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned this on the show before. There is kind of a difference, like, clubs like, he's been linked to like Bayern Munich. Clubs like that, and like Chelsea's notorious for this. Let's go out and buy as many players as possible. We'll loan them all back out. So it's nothing for a club like that to go get a player, bring them into their system.
I mean, Kevin Sullivan's supposed to sign with Manchester City like at age 18, right? So I mean, it's
right.
There's definite precedent when it comes to that happening in MLS. Not saying that it's happening here necessarily with Ninfa. Yeah. He's already turned 18.
Yeah, and it's not that he couldn't do that, but it's very normal for a club like that to go get a prospect and bring them into their system and everything like that. So, but it's an interesting situation because, David, I think you're right. If a team wasn't like that around and maybe willing to pay that money, maybe the conversation would be a little different. But David, I think you had like a follow-up question.
So, I mean, I guess, Willie, I mean, we were talking about Ninfa, we were talking about Oloko, et cetera, but what do you make of the Crown Legacy pipeline currently? So how well do you think we've been utilizing this? I know we had a friend of the show, Jose, on previously who raves about some of our technical staff and developing talent, but I want to get your perspective on how the team is utilizing Crown Legacy to help grow talent locally.
Well, it's a mix of, I would say, 3 different kinds of players right now. You've got dudes, obviously, who come through the Charlotte FC Academy, the Wyatt Holtz and the Peñas and like those guys like that, the people who I think who've watched the Charlotte FC Academy start to grow and things of that nature. Like you're seeing a lot of those guys start to get minutes of the Crown Legacy. I know the new goalkeeper is also somebody who has gotten some Crown Legacy minutes as well through the Charlotte FC Academy. So you're seeing players of that ilk. You're seeing these other players who are what I will call, just for lack of a better term, the sign and stash guys. That's your Edon Toklamati. That's your Rodolfo Oloko. That's your Emmanuel Ochegbu. That's your Morrison Ajiman. Morrison Ajiman, when I saw them sign him last year, I said to myself, this guy's going to – this is already after – it's either after or shortly after Adilson Malanda signed at Middlesbrough. And I said to myself, this is Adilson Malanda's replacement, 100%. Because he was the same kind of pedigree, same kind of build, and not necessarily somebody who comes from the same part of the world, but I think, again, he was somebody who had some kind of chatter surrounding him at some bigger clubs, and his story is incredibly fascinating. Like, he and I talked right before or right after his debut, and this is a guy who literally, before he actually got with the team that he was at, he was in Russia, he was in Germany, he was in Serbia. I mean, he was all over the place at a very young age, and the only exposure to the world he had was Accra, Ghana, and he had some family in England. So, I mean, this guy, from a whirlwind standpoint, has had to really, travel basically with a pair of boots on his back and nothing else but his game to carry. And boy, has it carried since he's come stateside. And played a couple of games last year, but then started camp with the team. The injury happens with Henry Kessler, and he's come in and he's not missed a beat. Toklamati came in here basically to get some seasoning at the end of one season, and then was breaking camp with the first team the following campaign. Rodolfo Oloko comes in, sets the world by storm, and Dean Smith literally said, "This guy's too good to play at MLS Next Pro." And
Right.
literally that weekend, he signed to the first team after some very crafty MLS roster machinations. He gets his first team minutes. He gets his first team start in the Open Cup, and then his first overall start. He's the youngest Charlotte FC player to start in a game for us at the MLS level. So you have those players, the sign and stash dudes, and I'm not saying that those guys aren't done necessarily coming up. We've heard a lot about Emmanuel Echegbu. He had an unfortunate injury to start the season too. So it's a situation where maybe his time is coming soon as well. And then you've got other players who can be, what I would call the depressed asset. When they signed Hugo Bonge, like I'm sitting there, I'm like, that guy was available? And I knew Toronto loved him. And he scored the only goal for Crown Legacy over the weekend as they kept the win streak going. So it's really become, I think, a multifaceted approach to player development and player management. You've got a Crown Legacy team that could go out there, and I'm not going to sit here and say that they would, place high in the league, but they could probably hold their own against maybe rotated MLS squad. Like I wouldn't be upset with any of those dudes having to go out there and play. I mean, Jack Neely's on that squad. Will Cleary's on that squad. Hassan
Aaron John.
Aaron John has been great too as well. Hassan had a real good run as well. Willian, I feel bad for him. He had an injury. So his season has kind of been on hold as well. But they got a lot of dudes who people, I think, would be like really envious to have in their system. And I think it's a great credit to Bobby Belair, Tommy Wilson, Zoran Cornetta, what they've done with that club. And even a guy like Kevin Sawchek, who, was the interim coach after Jose Tavares came off and, stuck around on the squad after Gary Dicker was hired. And now Gary's with the first team. So he's somebody who's been, I think, a good steward of the club and somebody who now is reaping the benefit because he's got a squad that I think, quite frankly, is the strongest they've had in their young existence.
Yeah, and that's not we mentioned a boatload of people there, but then we also had Patrick Aljamain, Tavares, Brandon Cambridge, also too. Like people have already come and and gone. So
yeah, and I was just talking about guys on the current roster, but I'm just saying there's a great pipeline of guys like that. You had Yuri and Pat and all that stuff. Yeah,
it's really truly remarkable. And David, you brought up Jose, who follows the Union, and Union's always been really big, but he praises us for that pipeline. And I think it's really something that we need to, it's a feather in our cap and really well done by the front office. I think that's something that's kind of overlooked in a way. We're always trying to sign big name players overseas, but this pipeline has been killer for us.
Yeah. So I know, Willie, you kind of talked a little bit about Open Cup, but I hate to use this term because we used it a lot last year, maybe in the press or out there, schedule congestion, right?
Oh, yeah.
So if you're looking ahead right now, we've got 3 games in the next 8-ish days, right? So we've got, Orlando on Wednesday, we've got Nashville on Saturday, we've got Atlanta coming up on Tuesday. Looking ahead at Tuesday's next Open Cup round, if you were Dean, do you think you rotate the roster a little bit again against Atlanta, or do you think he kind of runs a little bit of a heavier lineup this time because it's an MLS squad, goes for it, kind of helps progress us in the Open Cup? Or what would you do if you were Dean in that situation?
Well, not to completely hedge my answer. I think a lot of it depends on how these next 2 games go. Because, anybody who's out there is thinking, you can go in and roll Orlando, right? Well, it doesn't always happen that way in MLS play. This is a league that is full of parity. But let's just say, for argument's sake, you go out, you beat Orlando. Nashville's a 90-minute game. I don't know if you're going to have the luxury of resting your starters after the 60th or 70th minute ahead of a Tuesday contest. I still think you probably, you don't see the Westwoods and the Reams and the Zahas out there, but you could very well see the Toclamatis and the Vargases and the Alocos. And I think you could also see a lot of the first team guys too, who might not necessarily have the minutes behind him. And I think it's going to be a stronger lineup than what we saw against Independence. I think there was probably a strong feeling that you could go out and win with that 11 you put out there. I don't know if you see Kalina or not. I think Tyler Miller is a very accomplished goalkeeper. I think they feel better about him even than they did David Bingham, because I think he's a younger version of what you got out of Bingham, which is somebody who was a veteran, has a lot of experience behind him, and also comes in very motivated to try and prove himself. So I think there's definitely a desire to keep that going. And again, I think a lot of it also depends on how good Tim Ream is feeling too. Could be, I mean, I could envision a scenario where if Tim Ream's groin is bothering him Wednesday, Saturday, maybe you see him play on Tuesday. I don't know. So I think it's a situation where, you look at this from the standpoint of, yes, it's 3 games in the span of 7 days. You have to manage your roster accordingly. I do think, though, that you are going to see more first-team guys. Heck, Abada didn't play on the weekend. Who knows what is in stake for Wednesday and or Saturday, but he definitely can feature as well. So I think it's one of those things where, you have a team in Atlanta who, if anybody's looked at their form and looked at the table, they have not necessarily impressed in Tata Martino 2.0, but you don't overlook anybody. And you look at it from the standpoint of, you want to win the cup, you want to get yourself forward in it. And maybe yes, it's a quick turnaround, but you also get the extra day of rest, which helps you as well. So as Ashley Westwood likes to say, we'd all rather play games than train. So I think that's something you look at and say could also win to their benefit as well. But I do expect it's a long answer. I'll sum it up succinctly. I do think the squad will be stronger. I don't know if you put out a full first team slate against Atlanta on a week from Tuesday.
I just have to. Sorry. So I was just going to say, I love Ashley's quote there. That was my motto playing soccer as well, and look where that kept me at. So no, so that's great. So go ahead, Swift.
The highest level, Kessler, the highest level.
Sunday Beer League. There we go.
We talked about schedule congestion, and we definitely want to look ahead at the Orlando match. But let's go back to when we picked up 3 points on the road against NYCFC on a baseball field, hopefully for the last time.
They don't like being called NYCFC anymore, right?
What is it?
I did not.
They don't. They apparently, this is a couple of years ago now, they dropped that from their branding slogans, and in their game notes they said you can call us New York City FC, you can call us New York City, you can call us City, you can call us the Pigeons, you can call us Los Celestes, but they do not want you calling them NYCFC anymore.
I think you can call them that when they stop playing on a baseball field. I think that's when you start. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well,
weird.
Well, the good news is next year.
That's their thing.
Yeah,
that's their thing.
Yeah,
that's their thing. I get it.
That's interesting. Yeah. That before we get into the game itself, I want to go back for people that don't know. When you're calling a game, do you guys get little notes from the opposing team or little tidbits to kind of like, hey, during the calls here, make sure you're doing this and that?
So we get a variety. We get a battery of information. We get a stat pack every week that comes from Elias that basically is just the rudimentary counting stats, which is games played, goals, assists, shots, cards, whatever. We get that, and then each team puts out a packet of game notes. I would put ours that the great John Gasparoni collates among the best in the league. So I think that's definitely a gold standard to definitely admire too. I will say there are some teams' game notes that are pristine, well kept, with a lot of information, and then there are some that are rudimentary and don't help me a bit. So it really
is it
does
like written
vary.
on like Post-it notes and stuff?
I mean, you could tell the people don't use like Adobe Illustrator or things of that nature. And as somebody who, I had an internship in college where I was helping put together game notes, actually 2 separate internships. One was a lot more detailed than the other person's was, but still, I gained an appreciation for the art of putting together game notes and different things and tidbits and what to look for. Obviously, for soccer, you have to look a little deeper, and I even think there's probably an even more expansive nature of what's happening there because, you have different calculations of expected goals that people use, and you have FB Ref and SofaScore and FOTMOM and all the you are given a bevy of different things. But I have those I take from. I have the counting stats like we get from Elias. I would say among the Eastern Conference broadcasters, I know probably 3/4 of them very, very well, to the point where, like, if I got a question or if I like the person, I'll pick up a phone and I'll call them. I do it a lot more with the Western Conference teams just because we don't see them after a while. Like,
Sure.
I talked with my guy Joe Dottino at LA Galaxy for the first time in a couple of years. That was great. I'll call my guy down in Houston, Glenn Davis, who doesn't do the games anymore. Unfortunately, he got unfortunately let go, but he knows the Dynamo about as well as anybody. So when we get them here, I'll definitely call them. But even Dallas, like, we've never had a Dallas game, so I'm definitely going to reach out to those guys. But yeah, most of the time, I would say, between the calls with broadcasters, the notes we get, and the counting stats, that's kind of how I prep my board. Like, you guys can even, I'll show you one. I got one sitting right here.
Yeah.
This is what a board basically looks like for our. I think this was a preseason game we did a couple years back.
Okay.
This might have been preseason versus. Actually, it was preseason versus Galaxy last year. So there you go.
Okay. Very
So
cool.
you can see all kinds of different information. You can see, like, I got little notes on guys and things of that nature. So it's cool. It's a cool little system that I have.
Nice.
And they're on Post-it notes too. So I can move them around, and I can, if the formation changes mid-game, we use that or I use that to make that happen.
Man, if anybody ever needs any screenshots and grabs, I'm your man. I can draw. No, I'm just kidding. So let's.
Half the guys on that list aren't even on the team anymore. I see Ben Bender. I see
I
Adamon. Brandon Cambridge. Melanda's on there. So Micah Thomas, who's on loan right now. So we're okay.
Let's get into the game.
Sure.
I'm going to call them NYCFC.
You can do whatever you want. I don't care.
Let's begin
Not
with
offending me.
Let's begin with the starting 11. 2 changes. What did you think
really.
of? Was it 3?
It was 3 changes: Bronico, Zaha, and Aloko.
Oh yeah, well, Zaha's back in.
Yes.
You're right. You're technically, yeah. But what did you think of the? I guess the more specifically the Bronico and the Aloko changes.
So I love Brand, but I also don't know if I necessarily thought that Didi did anything to lose his spot. I think they liked Bronico because it was a situation where you were going to have the tighter pitch, so Bronico could have a greater effect. That's kind of why I thought they went with Bronico there a little bit. I know you saw Didi in late at the end, and he actually got stuck in on a couple of good challenges. I know Didi's a very controversial player for a lot of people, but I think he's somebody who gets stuck in really, really good. I know when it comes to offense, that's not what you look for with either of those two guys. I think that's part of the reason you brought in a Luca De La Torre. And I even asked Dean about Luca specifically going into the game Saturday, and he said, look, he just is not spatially aware of where we need him to be in a macro sense.
Right.
So I think think they're working on that with him. He's mentioned multiple times that we are in it on the long term for Luca De La Torre. So it's they signed him a long deal. He's going to be a part of this roster, and I think he can do some good things when he has the ball at his feet. It's just, I think it's a bit of a moment of truth / confidence when it comes to what he's dealing with right now, and also just kind of trying to figure out where he fits in Dean's system, because he's played most systems that he's playing with 3 flat midfielders. He's not playing with 2 and a 1. So he's having to cover a heck of a lot more ground, and he's trying to figure out where he fits in that eco space. So to make a long answer on the Bronico thing, I think that's why they went with Bronico. I love giving Aloko his full debut. I love that. And it's not because of anything that Vargas or Abada can't do, but I kind of alluded to it earlier. Aloko made Kevin O'Toole run ragged throughout the entire game. If you watched, and again, we are only limited to what we can see based on what we saw on the monitor, but anytime the ball was going to him, like, Aloko had his man beat. The ball wasn't always necessarily clinically there, but Aloko had his man beat. And I know he gave the guy fits. He's very physical. He's got those broad shoulders. I know people look at his thighs, his quads. I think his quads and Morrison's quads are like two of the best on the team. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah.
I used to think Bronico's quads were the best, but now he's got company. So from that perspective, you definitely got a couple of dudes who are not going to be taken lightly when it comes to 1v1 challenges. I think he can beat you with the brawn. I think he can beat you with the finesse. We know he can cross the football, and we also know he can shoot it too, if you've watched any of Crown Legacy's games. So I think he brings you a little bit something different, but not unlike what Patrick Ajman used to be as a super sub. I think Kaylin Vargas was that super sub in the New York game, because after spending 70 some odd minutes chasing Rodolfo Loco around the park, they had no smoke for Vargas, and Vargas was able to get himself a lot of great opportunities, including the one he scored for the goal.
Right. There was at least twice that he was open, because I think Pep tried to get him that first time, and
the first
and
one, and he said he missed it, but the second one was much more on frame.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point. I was a little shocked that he got the start. I thought he would get some minutes for sure. I thought it would be maybe flipped, but I thought he played great, and he's exciting to see. And again, this pipeline has worked well. But to your point, I think he's more physical. Out of the three, I think he's bigger. Vargas is good on defense, better than Abada. And I just gotta say, like, Abada's like third in that pecking order for me. And so it's just, it's kind of sad to see that, but at the same time, it's very exciting to see that now. And we talk about depth on the show all the time. Now it's exciting to see what we saw against New York, is that first half, you can have somebody run the defender into the ground. Second half, it's game on. And to have those choices is great.
Well, that's something that Dean basically said at the beginning of the season, and something that I think we all saw in the playoffs was the biggest issue, is that New York City could bring on dudes who were threatening off the bench. Like, think about the game on Saturday. They have a DP on the bench in Tyus Magno, who's played in every game. He scored a hat trick for them against Westchester. So definitely somebody who's got quality, and somebody who went on loan to Corinthians just to kind of get some more seasoning, and he proved himself there. So, we saw it in the playoffs, like I said, and part of what they wanted to do was deepen that bench. And I think you saw during the offseason, you saw a lot of the roster get turned over. Now, none of it was from the starting 11 necessarily outside Malanda. And again, he was turned over for a much different reason than, some of these other guys were. But they really did well to rebuild their bench. And I know what you're saying about Abada. I know he's kind of snake bit right now, and I feel for the young man, because I think he's trying, and I think he comes in, and it's not for a lack of effort. But I do think that he is part of that potency that you can get off the bench, particularly in a situation, for example, if you're talking about in a Loco situation. I think Liel is given a much greater opportunity to succeed with a guy like a Loco in front of him. So similarly to Vargas, I just think Vargas is the one who got the call. So I think that's a situation where you have that ability to bring that kind of quality off the bench. I think De La Torre is somebody who's got an opportunity to score goals at some point in his MLS career with Charlotte FC. I think you've got defenders who can definitely see out a result, whether it's Bronico or Diani, whichever one of those guys doesn't start. I think you've got great reserve defenders. Hell, David Schnegg could start on any MLS roster.
Yes, you're right.
As left back. It just happens to be playing behind Harry Toffolo, who I think is Charlotte's best left back they've ever had. So, and that's not to diss Christian Fuchs, but Christian is somebody who I think even he would tell you his best days were behind him when he came to Charlotte FC. And I say that with all the love and respect and great admiration for Christian Fuchs. But I think Harry Toffolo comes in and he has the ability to attack. He has the ability to cross. I think he's underrated defensively. And I think also, and he's even spoken to this, I asked him directly about it, he's somebody who has a temperament to play on the same side as Wilfred Zaha, which I asked Toffolo, I said, what is it like to play with Zaha? And he said something to the effect of, you have to be patient like a parent. And I think it's something that you saw him say, rather poignantly. And I found it interesting in the game Zaha scored at home against Philadelphia. There was a moment where the two of them were kind of going back and forth, and I noticed it. We both noticed it on the radio, Anna and I. And yet, when Zaha scored the goal, the first thing I noticed was Harry Toffolo jumping into his arms. So, for anybody who's sitting there and saying that the stuff that happens in these games when it comes to these guys talking to each other has a detrimental effect, I think it's a very tight room, is what I'll say. I think it's a very tight room. I think there's a lot of, iron sharpening iron that takes place in that room. And I think they generally all love each other. And so I think those are just the kind of things that I notice. But I know, again, I get on tangents, but that's the long way of answering that. I think the lineup was a strong lineup, and I think that the bench is a heck of a lot stronger than we've ever had it.
It's so funny. We literally talked about that on the show. I guess
the kerfuffle.
Yeah, and how Harry can handle Zaha and give it right back to him when needed. And I think, to your point, it's that iron sharpens iron type of thing. You did bring up Harry, and I'm going to look over the Yuri Urunen slander for a minute, but we will saying that Harry's the best left back. I think Yuri was pretty good, but Harry has been good. However, I do want to talk about.
There was a dip. I think there was a dip in Yuri's game at the end of his time here. I really do.
Okay.
I kind of agree with Willie P. That's okay. We'll leave it at that.
Maybe so. Okay.
I didn't realize there was a big ass Yuri Urunen stand here on the show. I didn't realize that.
I was a big fan. Now,
you really don't like Harry?
No. I like Harry a lot, and so I got to meet Harry before he actually signed. I think it was the Whitecaps game. He was here, just kind of taking things in. I actually got to have like a long conversation with him. Anyway, I like Harry. I will say this: I don't think Harry played well in this game. I know he had the assist.
Not in the first half.
Yeah, and that's what I want to get to.
Second half was a lot better.
Yes, let's get into the first half. I want to get your thoughts on some things, especially the first first 35 minutes, because New York had a lot of chances. Kalina comes up with some great saves. I think there was like a good save in the 15th minute. I think there was another one in the 24th minute. And also, Morrison saves a goal. If you go back and look at this, Kalina makes a save, and then Morrison blocks the
second save, basically.
Yeah. But what are your thoughts in that first 35 minutes? I feel like we get a little lucky. One goes off the post. What do you think was the reasoning for us not really getting off the mark well?
Well, I think, again, it almost kind of felt like a continuation of what happened against Nashville, where they were allowing New York to possess it a lot. And again, on that constrained pitch, you did not want to be over aggressive and take the ball away and feel like you were going to get yourself in a numerical inferiority. And I think that's part of kind of their game plan when they're in that mid to low block. I think they did try to press it sometimes, but I think they were cognizant of not trying to be overstretched with that press. And I think New York just plays a simple possession style when they're in that building, because they know they don't have a lot of space. I mean, they're not a team that plays direct. They play a lot of possession-oriented football, and we've seen Charlotte FC struggle to get the ball off of teams like that who are possession dominant, unless they are prone to mistakes, which, again, then Charlotte is able to be very prone and very prescient when it comes to the counterattack. So I think what they did was they, very similarly to what happened against Nashville, they put some more legs in the middle. They moved Zaha further inward, so that did clog things up. And I think that allowed us to dominate a little bit more of the possession. I think they were a lot more clinical in the second half when it comes to connecting passes and being able to play a little bit more keep away. But I'll give credit to something Anna said on the broadcast. After they scored that goal, she used the same quote that Dean uses, or at least a paraphrase of it. Goals change games, moments change games. And at that point, you saw New York get a little bit more aggressive in the after that first 10 minutes when Charlotte FC dominated and got themselves the goal. And their passes were a touch behind, a touch ahead, not as crisp. They were definitely a lot more antsy with the ball. And I think that allowed us to be able to pounce and make it a more even game. Again, I think it comes down to Charlotte's got to be better at taking the ball off their opponent, and they got to be able to connect passes a little bit better than they were, say, in the, I would say, last three halves prior to the second half against New York City.
Yeah, that was so a couple things that, I brought up Harry before I forget. There was the shot that we talked about where Kalina saves and Morrison has to save the rebound. Harry gets beat pretty bad on that play, and there's another one where it's a back post header that Harry doesn't even jump for. Kalina got really angry there. Um, I just think sometimes there's a turn off, and sometimes Harry is called a little bit out of position going up the field. That's my only worry with him. Other than that, I think he's great. But another thing that I saw in the first half is that New York would sometimes just send one man to press. And for whatever reason, that was throwing us off. And I could not figure that out. We've always kind of struggled with the press. And I'm trying to figure out why we continue to have that problem. And it's a problem that we've had every season, not especially, but under Dean as well. And can't really figure that out. And I don't know if it's non-movement off the ball, but it seemed like within 2 passes, we were giving the ball right back to them. And it was just cycle and repeat.
And again, I don't know if this was a factor, but Tim said, or at least Dean Smith said, that Tim hurt his groin around the 30th minute. So I don't know if they were dealing with something where he was limited and they were trying to kind of stay away from him. And I think effectively at that point, maybe they were playing with 10 and they weren't using Tim as much. Again, I'd have to go back and watch it. But again, the build up, I think, is something along the lines of you're breaking in a new center back, you're breaking in a new, new foursome, if you will, when it comes to being at the back. And I think too, something that Adilson Malanda was very underrated in is his ability to progress the ball up the field. He had, I think, something in the neighborhood of the top 4 or 5 in progressive passes or progressive carries when it came to his defensive nature, and he was among the best in the league at doing that. Tim Ream's a great ball distributor as well. I think Dean really wants to try and at least figure out a way, whether it's by hook or by crook, to progress the ball through the midfield, because it's something that they've wanted to do in their entire time. I think going back to the New York Red Bulls game, for example, you saw them really kind of junk a lot of that. I think even Austin too, going in back further. Austin, they just broke lines, and they didn't worry about progressing to the middle. They were okay going down both wings, and maybe it's a situation where you just don't feel like you have to do that every time. I think they were trying to keep New York honest. I think part of the reason they were so it was so hard for them to build up is because they knew they had the constrainment when it came to the wings. You can't necessarily progress as much down the wing because there isn't as much space on the baseball pitch. So I think they felt like they needed to be able to prove they can carry it through the middle, and they just had a hard time doing so, to the point where, again, what they ended up doing was creating more space on the wing by moving Zaha inside, and that allowed them to have more dribbling space on the wing, on both sides for that matter, because you had to account for both Wilf and Pep in the middle, and that constrained their midfield to the point where they were able to find pockets of space on the side, and particularly after the goal, they were a heck of a lot more threatening.
Yeah, good point.
So I know you mentioned it earlier. So what did you think about the sub there in the second half, Willie P, around, with Ream getting subbed out? Saw a little bit of a familiar face come in and make some significant minutes there for Charlotte. So what did you think about that sub that took out Tim Ream? And then do you know anything about his knock? I know you mentioned it earlier, but any word on that as well?
Yeah, I don't know anything necessarily about his status for Wednesday. I know Dean mentioned after the game that he's a question mark, and I guess we'll see whether or not he trains on the pitch on Tuesday, and that'll give us an indicator of whether or not he makes the flight. I, to be quite frank with you, wondered whether or not we'd see Tim Ream on the midweek anyway, just based on the fact that, it is a World Cup year, and Tim is getting up there in age, and you have a pretty capable stable of center backs to be able to go to, whether it's Privet or Kessler. You could go to. I did find it curious that Kessler was left off the roster going in. I don't know if there's a knock there or something along those lines. So it could be something, involving that. But they ended up taking Privet to New York City, and darn it if Drew didn't look like his old self in the good sense. And I think it was great to see. I think seeing what he did on Wednesday, I think gave him a little bit of confidence in the Open Cup tilt. So I think, he definitely acquitted himself very well. That is, I don't want to say a scary thing, but I mean, you got two guys who are 25 years old or younger. So Andrew's the veteran there. But I go back to what Dean said in the preseason. Look, Andrew Privet was close to the player of the year for him in Dean's first season. So we know that there's good soccer in Andrew Privet. We definitely do. So I think it comes down to, again, confidence, getting match minutes. I think knowing when your next match is going to be played, I think it's a big thing for these guys. I think it's the hardest position to play because you don't see a lot of subs very often, unless you're changing the system and going to a back five late in a crucial contest. You're not subbing out your center back for anything other than an injury, and so it's always a very, very tough spot. I don't think we graduate enough how tough of a spot that is for a center back to come in. I almost liken it to a backup quarterback coming in the NFL, whereas anytime you see that happen mid game, it almost always is a dire situation. And the fact that he handled it as adequately as he did, I know that, they did give up a goal, but that one wasn't his fault, wasn't Kalina's fault. It was a wonder strike by Nicolas Fernandez-Mercado. But I think he contributed a heck of a lot to that win. And I will say if he has to start against Orlando, I'm confident that he can get the job done.
Yeah, I feel really good. Sorry, David, to cut you off. I feel really good that he got some minutes and is playing well. I hated to see, you mentioned confidence, and I think that was a big part of it. I hated to see that because he had been so good, and then there seemed like there was a drop off, and there could be various reasons for that, but I think a lot of it is confidence. So it's good that he got the minutes against the Independents, and then got came in and finished the game out.
It comes down to it's the same player. It'd be one thing if it's a dude we've never seen play good minutes. We know the good minutes are in him.
Right.
And I think that's the important thing.
Yeah. Go ahead, Gus. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there.
You're good. I was going to relate with Privet as a former center back that, never got subbed off. It's hard. And I'm just joking out of it. Yeah. Anyways. So Will, I've got I guess a fun question, or I guess I think it's fun for me, but, so speaking of that field and that pitch, because I know you're a gigantic Mets fan,
don't tell anybody.
First of all, it's a great stadium to be in to watch baseball.
Sure.
The commentators when I was watching the game the other night were kind of making comments around players picking up some of the sod, taking pictures with it, kind of joking around pregame. And then I think Pep Biel made a comment on it, and Dean did as well, about some of the quality of the pitch. So, I mean, does it bother you? I mean, I know you're not playing it. I'm not playing in it, that kind of stuff. But does it bother you when you have to call games on those kind of smaller pitches or anything like that?
I mean, it definitely is something that I'm glad we don't have to do much longer. I know that I think they're going to have to play there play in the baseball stadiums during the sprint season. But I'm glad that bar another postseason matchup with New York City, that we only really get one more at most game in a baseball stadium, because at the same point in time, I think it doesn't, I think, feel like it doesn't feel like a top tier league soccer situation. Like, it just doesn't. I know people will say, "Oh, what about turf? Or what about this? Or what about that?" Like, there's nothing wrong with the dimensions of Bank of America Stadium, and Bank of America Stadium's turf is rated the highest rating that they can give to a turf field by FIFA. That's a fact. I know people will look at me and say, "Willie, you're putting out a stat that doesn't have any backing." I've been told that. Like, that's a thing. So it comes to me where I'm just sitting here, I'm just like, those are the things that I just don't think give the league the best visual point. I wonder I'm going to wonder what happens when Messi plays there, because, like, I'm sure when the international soccer community sees that, they probably laugh at us. And I don't like that. I don't like anything that gives the league a bad name. I know that they take a particular offense to it because they are very, very sensitive about it. And, I've had some different interspersing comments with people who are in the New York City FC bandwidth or whatever. I've been on some podcasts there with them and made light of it. But at the same point in time, I'm glad it's almost over, because I can tell you right now, I didn't like going to either stadium. I know we had a little bit more success at Citi Field than we've had at Yankee Stadium. I know Yankee Stadium, we got the playoff win. We got a draw and a win at Citi Field, so a little bit more success. But I'm glad that chapter is let me put it this way. I'm rooting for a home game against New York City in the sprint season. How about that?
Oh.
So we never have to go back.
There we go. It is a beautiful stadium to watch a baseball game in, though. I will say that.
It's a great listen, it's anybody who can tell you who's been to both stadiums will tell you Citi Field's got the better food, the better atmosphere, the whole thing.
Does.
It's like, again, and I love that baseball team. There's not a lot of winning that's happened in that building yet, and I made reference to as much when we were on the broadcast. I said, after their primary tenant has basically made this place famous for not winning, the secondary tenant's about to do the same. So, I made plenty reference to that. So I'm happy we got the victory.
It's awesome. Sorry, that was my fun question. I just had to get that little jab in for a Mets fan in there. But So what'd you think about the 2 goals from Charlotte in that game? So I know Charlotte obviously made some strategic changes a little bit, and I'm sure Swift is going to talk about that. But what'd you think about the goals that Charlotte scored in that second half to seal the deal there?
Well, they were both, I think, products of that tactical shift of Zaha to the middle and using those guys as dual 10s, because it did give Harry Toffolo. So I'll liken it to this. Remember when we've had Pep on the right wing for the longest time and it made Byrne the free runner down the right side? It's almost the exact opposite scenario where you move Zaha a little bit further in. I call it kind of a slingshot. You slingshot Zaha in the middle and it allows Toffolo to get a free run down the left side. And he had a heck of a lot more space. That first goal was an incredible symphony of a goal because you saw a one touch from Toffolo, the one touch from Zaha prior, and then Toklamati, who I'm so happy that he got a goal because you could tell that he had been fighting it for a little bit. Yeah. And I don't really know I know Dean was critical a lot of his positioning, but I think a lot of it also just came down to the fact that the dude was just seeing enough of the ball. And I think it's a situation where
searching for it, moving all over the place, trying to get it.
Yeah. He's like, look, man, I can come here, I can go there, I can go up, I can go back, I can go outside or whatever. And I think Dean has been very, very poignant about, hey, you got to trust it's coming and just stay high. I mean, we had the same problem with Swiderski when he was first here. He would come all the way back to the halfway line to receive the ball. And it's like, nah, Carol, we need you higher. And so I think the same kind of thing was the case with Pat too, even at his first little bit, when he was first starting. It was another thing that Dean was like, look, man, we need you to stay high. And I think it's a hard thing when you're not receiving the ball to trust that it's going to come. And the fact that it did in such a moment and he made no mistake was incredibly, great to see. Yeah. The Vargas goal was great too, just because again, I think it proved a lot of the things I talked about earlier, and the fact that they had to account for Zaha, which meant that they didn't have enough bodies for Pep, and they end up getting it to Kerwin, and Kerwin makes no mistake. Look, the biggest part of what is going to make Charlotte FC successful is creating a Sophie's choice for these defenders. Because if you have a Wilfred Zaha, if you have an Edon Toklamati who's in form, if you have a Pep Biel and whoever you put at right wing, a Loco or Vargas, you're making center backs and fullbacks have to make a choice on where they flow their defense. And if they don't know where they're supposed to be, if they don't know who the focal point is, and all 4 of those dudes are in form, it makes it very, very difficult to defend. And then you add a free runner in Toffolo that creates basically an extra midfielder. That's more bodies than they can account for unless they're playing a low block. And teams are loath to play a low block against Charlotte because it does allow a lot of that type of ingenuity to be exploited. And so I think it comes down to, when you see it work in such perfect harmony and symphony, it's an incredible way to play soccer. And I think that was real great tactical shrewdness from Dean to say, you know what, we need to do something to get our own players the ball in the middle and almost kind of force feed them in a way and say, hey, look, if we put Zaha in the middle, he's going to have to get the ball because they're going to finally flow people out to the wing for Toffolo, and that gives Wolf the ability. I mean, you saw, I'm sure many of you guys saw the Techers video they put out there today from the club. I mean, that was some of the best dribbling clinic that you're ever going to see from a Charlotte FC player, and Wolf was just absolutely sensational.
Yeah, and we should say, on this show, we have been critical of Dean's tactics and doing things on the fly. But so I think we do have to tip our cap this match for him making some moves, making subs, doing things a little differently to put us in a position to get a win, because I did notice Zaha moving more inside, and I was kind of like, interesting. So that's what I want to see more of, like the on the fly adjustments too. And so it was really, really cool to see us be able to do that and actually get paid off with a goal. And Zaha, that's why you pay him the money. That's why he is who he is. He can dribble like that and lay a ball off to Tuffalo, who, one times it up to Tokolmadi. And Tokolmadi, he didn't have the best game, but when he had the chance, he took it and scored. And that's about all you can ask for. And to your point, Will, like, he does need to stay up top, that that stretches the field, and it gives Pep space, it gives Zaha space, it gives everybody space. When you start clumping up, you can't make those passes, especially in that small field. So again, big tip of the hat to Dean for those tactics, because we have definitely been a little critical of the lack of changes in tactics on the fly. So okay, so we've talked about the good, right? Changes, the goals, Vargas coming in, beautiful shot, by the way. But let's talk about the rest of the game. The game, we're up 2-0. Game is stretched. We're going back and forth. And of course, if you've been listening to the show past couple weeks, I do have some screen grabs. And Will, I want you can make fun of these if you want. But I want to get your thoughts on this. And I'm sorry I'm having to put you through this, but this is what we're going to do. Corey, if you want to bring up this.
While he's bringing this up, I just have to give context here that Willie P was just talking to us about his internships and pre-match work and things like that. I'm just waiting to hear his perspective on Matt Swift's drawings here. But go ahead.
So for those that are not on YouTube watching, you're just listening to the podcast. We're in the 66th minute. At this point, we're actually only up 1-0. New York is in transition. You've got the player with the ball. I've highlighted two folks, one with the ball and the player that ends up shooting this, and Kalina has to make a really great save. So this is the start of the play. And we've talked about this past couple episodes, the progression, the awareness, and that is kind of maybe, Will, I want to get your kind of thoughts on this, because I think this is where we sometimes struggle defensively. So if you go to the next frame, player still has the ball. Now, what's happening here? The guy, I think that's Morales on the left-hand side out there. I think he's the one that ends up shooting this ball. He's still wide open. We're very compact like we usually are, but I've highlighted and put question marks around Pep Biel and Ashley Westwood. Now, Ashley Westwood gets sucked over because his man has kind of, come over too, but Pep Biel doesn't necessarily track his man back. And this has happened a couple of times. And this is where I think we get in trouble. So we have what we've got here. And Corey, if you go to the next one. So now the guy that Pep has given space and didn't track back, he now has the ball. Westwood is overcommitted to this side. I've put a question mark around Nathan Byrne because, for how we play defense, we are very compact. That leaves the space out wide. The only problem is the guy out wide is kind of like Zaha. He can make things happen. He can shoot the ball really well. So you kind of see where this is going. And again, I think we overcommit. We don't track runners through the middle. I think Luca Del Torre, we mentioned him. I think he struggles with that a little bit. Pep too, he might be gassed, doesn't track back. And then sometimes I think Brandt and Westwood maybe don't communicate the best sometimes, and they overcommit. And so if you go to the next frame, Corey, now there's two avenues here that the guy with the ball can make. He can actually play a through ball, but he ends up just kind of like slipping this out to Morales. And again, you see how compact we are. And a lot of that's by design. But this leads to a really, really good shot. And this could have been, I think, even worse. Again, if this is a quick ball through, I think it's even more dangerous. But he kind of like lays it off wide. Morales is not the fastest guy on the planet. But this is where I don't think we have another one. I think that was the last frame, right, Corey? Oh, it is. Okay. So he has the ball, and he cuts back in and has a brilliant shot. Now, Byrne, in his defense, is at this point kind of in decent position, but it's you have to still run over there because we're so compact. And I think that's where we struggle sometimes.
Well, I
And
think
we'll-
in that position, I think maybe he's, I don't want to say not necessarily showing a lack of respect, but I mean, Morales is 39 years old now. So it's like, I think it's one of those things where maybe Nate has a better feeling of his ability to get over to him. Like he knows it's going to take a pretty broad switch to get over to Morales, at least when the ball was basically in that right central channel.
Mhm.
So I think from that sense, it's a situation where maybe he's more confident in his ability to get over there. Obviously, once the ball moves closer over there, he's in better position. But like you said, you'd rather him not be able to get the ball. But at the same point in time, against a player of that quality, the last thing you want to do is overcommit yourself.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that we've seen some overcommitments lead to goals in the past. And I think, again, it comes down to the fact that, whether it's by design or whether it's just by the ingenuity of the players, is that they're really just trying to keep themselves in a position where they're not getting beat over the top. And I think that's something that is something that both fullbacks, I think, are being told, because we see that a lot. I know you were critical of Harry and some of the moments that he was in, but I think it's a situation where the last thing they want to do is overcommit themselves. But I think they both have the ability to get a slide tackle in. They both have the ability to get themselves a foul when they needed to, especially when in the corner. No one's better at Nate at drawing the foul after he's won the ball and release some pressure. So I think it's a situation where he was trying to, I think at one point, show a little respect to Morales, but also maybe be a little bit more compact, as you say, because he knows it's going to take a pretty broad switch to get over to Morales right there first time from that right central channel move. But once the ball does move back closer to the middle, Burns at least closer in that position. Yes, he gets the shot off, but and it's not one that necessarily Dean would have wanted, because as we've seen Dean say, they are okay with the shots that come from outside the box. So I think it's a situation where they were cognizant of Morales' threatening ability, but also knowing that he could get over there. It was unfortunate from a breakdown standpoint that the ball got into Morales' hands and he was able to take a shot, but that's also why you have a keeper like Kalina who can bail you out.
That's just true. All right, so keep this in your back pocket. This scenario here, what you just said, Kalina, because we have a really good question from Matt Chantry later that I definitely want to get your take on, but just keep that in your back pocket. Before we get to kind of fan questions, let's I know we're going long. This is great, and we can go as long as we need to, but I want to make sure that we get to Orlando. We just picked up 3 points on the road. That kind of maybe cancels out the home loss, if you want to say that. But now we face Orlando, who is dead last in the East. They have 1 win, 25 goals against. What do you think will be the kind of keys to getting another road win here? And let's be honest, if we're going to beat a team, it probably needs to be Orlando.
It definitely does. Unfortunately, this is a scenario for Charlotte where complacency is kicked in matches of this nature in the past. When it comes down to it, and I know that I don't like having to say it, and I don't like thinking it, but I just know that it's kind of been the case in certain contests for Charlotte in the past, and I don't go into this match with a lack of confidence, because I know what Orlando is. I talked to my good friend Jessica Trauman, who did the game right before Orlando let go of Oscar Pereira, and I said, "Are they that bad?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, they're that bad." So it is a situation where it's like, okay, my eyes are not deceiving me, because I've watched as much of it as well as she has. I think we had a couple of cross fixtures where I saw Orlando play against them, and again, they are vulnerable at the back. They don't have a lot of offensive quality beyond Martino Hayda. And a lot of their other offensive quality is injured right now. I think their right now they don't have Duncan McGuire available to them. They don't have a couple of their midfielders who they've really counted on. Joran Girbe is not available. Wilder Cartagena is not available for his second long-term injury that he's had in as many seasons. And they don't have a lot of the guys they've had and become accustomed to defensively. They had Rodrigo Schlegel there forever. He's no longer with them. They have Robin Janssen, who's a year older. They don't have Alex Freeman, who was their sensational right back, who ended up getting sold for a pretty penny last season. So they're having to rebuild that situation as well. They got a couple of players that they've had for a while, like Ivan Angulo, who is somebody who's been there forever, but really hasn't ever really found it from a consistent basis. Their other great attacking midfielder, Marko Pasalic, has also been hurt. Looks like he's probably not going to play. So I say all that to say this needs to be a win for Charlotte FC. They also they had a big change at goalkeeper too as well. They had Pedro Gallese there for the longest time. They've got Maxime Crepeau, who is, again, I would say an MLS replacement level goalkeeper. He's just a dude. I think you have the ability to go in and score some goals against this squad, but you better not let them stay in the game for a long period of time, because I think the longer you let a team like that hang, you give them hope, you get them an opportunity to get a bunch of class. I will say, though, we have had a victory in Orlando in our history. It's it's one of the places we've won. We've won 19 road games, and Orlando is one of them. So believe me, I've counted them. So from that perspective, it's a situation where you look at it and say, this is one that Charlotte should win and get a little bit of a snowball rolling down the hill. And that kind of makes at Nashville feel like, I don't want to say house money, but makes you feel like, hey, if you go there and you can nick a draw, then you've got 7 points to start the road trip.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on that note, and I guess you've kind of answered it a little bit, but I've got two comments to add to the question. So one, there's been comments in our Discord and also online that we've read where people sometimes mention that Charlotte sometimes plays down to their opponent, right? And I know you kind of mentioned that a little bit there. Charlotte, while they have won in Orlando, it's only won against Orlando 2 times. Orlando's beat us 5 times. We've drew 5 times as well, right? So it's not like a team that we've, taken them out back and just, always win. So do you think there's any credence to that a little bit? And I guess any other final thoughts on going up against Orlando?
I referenced that institutional history a lot when it comes to these matches. But so much, I always think about the fact that every match is its own story. Every season's its own story. And you have different things and pockets that are involved in all those things. I do know that the sting of the postseason from 2 years ago is going to echo a lot in people's minds. I know that, going down there twice 2 years ago is something that it will be a kernel in the heads of guys like Ashley Westwood and those who had been down there. So I do think there's that part of it that maybe will always kind of stick in your brain. But I also think this club is motivated and they're not going to let anything like history kind of keep them from doing the job. And I do think that we've had good moments and good games against Orlando. I mean, I even go so far as to say that the playoff game we played against Orlando in Game 3 was the best we've looked in a do-or-die game. It is. Absent one moment, which I will go to my dying grave and say that that shirt tug of Jabril Gianni should not have made Duncan McGuire look like he was flopping like a fish out of water. I mean, I didn't think that rose to the level of a penalizable foul. I don't. And I felt bad for DD, and he and I have talked about that moment, and it was affecting him up until last year. He said as much on the air with me. So I look at those things and I say, look, results are sometimes punitive, and results are sometimes not the real testimony to the way the game goes. Dean told us last year when we started as well as we had, he didn't like the way we were playing, despite the results. He said, these results are flattering us. And then it turned out that it ended up going the other way. He said, I thought we were playing okay, but the results are going back the other way. So I think you never sometimes you're not as good as your result. Sometimes you're not as bad as your result. at the same point in time, I just want them to play good soccer, create, take advantage of a battered opponent, and go in and take care of business.
So do we. I was in Orlando for that last match. Don't like their fans at all.
I was down there for their playoff game.
Listen,
fans are the worst.
I can tell you guys this now. In that series, I had more MLS broadcasters. I won't tell you from which teams, but I had more MLS broadcasters reach out to me and say, "Beat those guys."
Yeah, they're the worst. Their fans are
for
horrible.
that very reason.
Yeah, their fans are really, 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 really bad. I'll just say that. Okay, so let's transition into some final questions. We don't have a ton, but we've got some good ones. Definitely want to get your thoughts on this one. And remember, I said keep that one thing in the back of your pocket. So let me pull this up real quick. Of course, I'll lose it right when I'm about to say it. So this one is from our good pal, Matt Chantry. And we had some good debate about this. And I'm still, I think I lean a certain way, but there's definitely, you could see this from two different ways. So he says, in our last 7 games, all competitions, we have conceded just 6 goals, and 5 of those were 2 worldies, 1 massive deflection, 1 absolute fluke own goal, and 1 late game consolation to Red Bull and garbage time. So his real question is our defense better than what we have been giving them credit for? The first 2 games, our defense was shaky, but since then, I think we've been up there with the best in the league statistically. That part I don't know if I agree with, but what is your thoughts on the defense? Do you agree with Matt? Do you disagree? Kind of where you land on that?
Well, think about the 2 goals that were scored against us against Nashville. Nashville created 0.6 expected goals against us, and I'm not a live by expected goals stan, but I know that stat doesn't mean nothing. Those are 2 very low percentage goals to be giving up when it comes to Charlotte FC. The deflection off of Tim Ream and the worldie by Eddie Tagseth. Worldie by Nicolas Fernandez-Mercado. Kalina fumbles 1. That's a 1 in a million fumble for him. Yeah. The Morrison Ajiman header. And I'm struggling to think of the last one.
Let's see.
I'm impressed that you remembered all of those because I did not remember some of those. But yeah, no,
I'm struggling to remember the last one. Red Bulls was the fumble.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Was it a deflection? Well, for Ream, is that the one that he?
The deflection off of Ream was the one from Patrick Yazbek.
Yeah, 2 worldies. He says 1 massive deflection. He said 1 absolute fluke on goal, and then the late game winner. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So again, it's again. I'll go back to the fact that we've been very, very, very good defensively, really since the Austin game. The Austin game, I think, is the last is that goal he's referencing. So that was the consolation goal from Austin as well. So it's one you look at and say, is that one that's going to completely, break the bank? No. And I think I keep coming back to the fact that so much of this season has been about trying to shore up the loss of Adilson Milanda. And I don't think it's a situation where you're missing him specifically, but I think they're still trying to figure out how to live without him because he, I think, covered up a lot of ills.
Yes.
And it's not to say that that they haven't been good defensively, but I think, I look back at Christian Kalina's goalkeeper of the year season, for example. I tried to ask Kalina, I asked him after the season, I said, is there one save or moment you could think back and look at and say was above any others in the year? And he couldn't give me one. What does that tell you? It tells you his defense in front of him was so good that everything he had to do was routine, and the ones that he gave up, he just was never going to stop. So that was basically the perfect year defensively for Charlotte FC. Now, last year, we know Kalina had a little bit of a shaky moment, and a lot of that was due to his own failings. And I'm glad he came out on the other side of that moment. He looks every bit the guy that he was in 2024 now, after coming out of the other side of the 2025 midseason malaise. But I also think the defense in front of him is still trying to work on how to work together, because you've had some interchangeable parts. You've had, Privet in, you've had Morrison in, you've had Ream out, you've had different players coming into the lineup. And I think, again, it just comes back to the fact that this is still a bit of a work in progress. And thankfully, they're getting the results to go with it. But I wouldn't say that it's worse. I would say that it's, to Chantry's point, it's probably a lot better than the raw numbers would dictate, especially given the fact that the goals that have been scored are of a degree that is probably a lot more difficult than we give it credit for. Like, we're not getting battered in games, so to speak.
So, Will, you bring up a good point about, and there was I guess some of the argument was some of these shots are rudimentary, like they're easy saves, so the stats get inflated. I will say this, we're tied for third in shots against. Kalina leads the league in saves. The 2 games, because we talk about like, oh, we got all these goals against 10-man sides. We've also given up goals in both of those games where red cards. So. And, I have the screenshot that I shared earlier, and I think that is where I see the problem. Yes, some of these goals, like Clean is not stopping those. Like, I get it. And then sometimes some of the stats can get inflated because they're easy saves. But I do think we still turn off defensively sometimes. I think we lose runners. I think we overcommit, like we talked about. So there's something there. So I guess what is the worst part? Like, are we saying, or how bad are people saying the defense is? Because we're not horrible. I won't say that. Yeah.
Here's the thing, Swift. It's very hard to get clean sheets in this league. It just is.
Yeah.
All the money is at the front of the pitch. It is. And in order to have a good defense, you have to have a couple of things. Number one, you have to have an MLS veteran. You have to have somebody who is an ascending talent, and you have to have dudes who basically are only playing in that league only. And I don't know how many, world-class defensive lineups that you have in Major League Soccer. What is the Achilles heel of most teams in the upper echelon of MLS who have incredible offensive talent? It's something we say about Inter Miami all the time. They leak goals. But what rescues those teams is they have those players who have a touch of class who could get them out of jail.
Yeah.
And that's how most teams have success in MLS. Teams that play, 1-0 soccer don't usually have a lot of success en masse in MLS. You don't see teams with massive defensive records win MLS Cup, win Supporter Shield. The teams that win Supporter Shields are the teams that score a lot of goals and give up some, but not to the level that it's going to hurt them. So I'm not saying that it makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside that Kalina's had a hard time getting clean sheets this year. But what I am saying is it makes me appreciate more what Adilson Malanda was to this side and this squad, in that you're hoping that Morrison can turn into that by the time he's done here, if in fact that spot is his to stay. So I come back to the fact that it's very, very hard to play defense in this league because of where all the money is on the pitch, mostly in the front three of all these teams.
And, Chantry, as we were kind of discussing this, is like, Kalina is part of the defense. So let me ask you about Kalina. Sure. Ends up being MLS goalkeeper of the year, starting pretty strong here. I feel like he has kept us in games, and kind of back to the defensive stat. I mean, New York did have 23 shots this game. That's a lot, 8 shots on goal, but Kalina made at least 3 saves that probably could have been a goal. How do you rate Kalina in the grand scheme of Charlotte FC as far as signings go? like how, I mean, where do you rate him? I know that's kind of tough. Like, is he top 3? Is he the best? So like, what do you think? Is longevity, all that comes into play, I guess.
I mean, he's a club legend already.
Yeah.
I think. He won the first ever individual award for a
That's
player
true.
on this team.
Yeah.
The only person who outranks him in appearances is Bronico. And I think eventually he might even surpass Bronico if he plays long enough here, because Bronico is at a point right now where he is getting appearances, but there are some times where he might not get appearances.
Yeah.
I think he's somebody who genuinely loves it here, is acclimated to the city, and I think
he loves the Hornets.
The fan base will look upon him fondly for that, Rain.
Yeah.
I think by the time he's done here, you'll look upon him and say that he's the cornerstone, and knowing a little bit of kind of the lead up to Kalina and some of the things that were being talked about behind the scenes that will go in my memoir one day. When all everybody else is dead and buried, I can tell you right now, I didn't know what it was going to look like when they signed Christian Kalina, because again, it was a little bit more of an unknown than some of the other options that were either being talked about or who were out there. And I think that they needed to get somebody who has a mentality that they knew what they were getting into with an expansion side, and he had to kind of take the lumps early with the way that roster. I mean, anybody who's seen this go from 2022, like I had to go back and look at something from our first season for a project that was happening over at the over with the communication side, and they were asking me to look back at some old footage, and I just looked at our roster and I think, man, the roster you have in 2026 is miles different than it was in 2022. But yet the constant is Kalina. And that's something that is an incredible testament to his resilience and his fortitude and how much he loves this club. He's talked about Charlotte like it's a mini Zagreb, and how incredibly comfortable he is here. His whole family loves it here. His wife loves it here. He's raised kids here. And so it's, I think he's looked at, I mean, I don't know who you would say is the best signing to this point of the time, but if it's anybody other than Kalina, you got to give me a good argument as to why, because I don't know if there is one.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was thinking about that after this game. I was like, man, Kalina might be the best signing we've had. I mean, just again,
if you want to say Zaha from a name standpoint, I think again a lot of his story is still yet to be written.
Sure.
I know Carroll currently is your goals leader, but I think he'll probably get surpassed by somebody here pretty soon.
Yeah.
Maybe Pep Biel becomes that if he plays long enough here.
That's kind of what I was maybe thinking too. But
I don't know if you can say that. I don't know if you can say that in this moment,
right?
Yet,
for sure. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Kalina's contract is up at the end of the season. He has an option for 2027, which I would imagine they'll exercise. Sure. But I wonder if maybe a longer term deal will happen for him. I definitely would like to keep him around. We have mentioned maybe the goalkeeper that was maybe going to be here and then left. But I'm sure glad that we got Kalina, and another tip of the hat to the scouting team and front office for bringing in, like you said, a club legend. It's great. But Gussler, I've hogged enough. You ask some questions now.
No, you're good, man. I think you picked this question because I mentioned your name. No, I'm just joking. So this is from this one's from Charles. So he says, as Matt Swift posted during the match, we were prone to making one or two passes and then turning the ball over. So this has been the case for a few years now, and it's usually a contrast to the play of the opposing team, including New York City FC on Saturday. So why can't we successfully pass the ball through the midfield? Is it the limited skill set of our midfielders? Are our players not familiar with the positioning and the movement tendencies of others, and long balls and hopes for lucky breaks are getting old? So you touched on that a little bit already, Willie P, but just would love to get your perspective on it, fully on that.
Yeah, I know it's frustrating that I know people want to see us be a more possession-oriented team. I think, again, it comes down to the fact that the teams loves trying to glut the middle with us, and I think sometimes it's like trying to, I don't want to say beat your head against the wall, but it does kind of feel that way at times when you're trying to force the ball through the middle and there isn't a lot of space. And I think they get in this mindset of, oh, hey, Dean wants us to play through the middle, but in reality, if the space is outside, don't be afraid of that. And I think, maybe there is this sense of, wanting to make it work through the middle, and it just hasn't. So again, I think so many of us who've played the sport, and I know Gustler, you mentioned your prowess about that.
Thank you.
I think those of us who haven't played it at a high enough level maybe don't appreciate the amount of options that's presented with a player in that moment. And I think it is a situation where, yes, these are professionals. You expect the most out of them. But I think at times there is a little bit of a crisis of confidence. And I do think too, as well, when you're in a situation like you were in that game against New York City, it is an atmosphere that probably doesn't play as well to Charlotte FC's strengths. Like Charlotte FC does well with a wider pitch, does well with a longer pitch, does well with a lot of space. And the space is very constrained when you play at Citi Field and Yankee Stadium. And they had to overcome some things in that contest and create space in a bit more of an unconventional manner. And I think until you got enough of a sample size to where the gaffer said at halftime, okay, here's how we're going to change it tactically. And I will say this too, a lot's been made about the slow starts. What Dean does after a team talk or after a second half, I would say about 80% of the time we come out looking a hell of a lot better than we did when we started. And he's become very, very good at tactically changing at halftime. There were a couple times after some of those summer games where after a water break, you get Dean, he gets on the whiteboard, you look at him and he's like, look, you got to go here, here, and here, and here, and here. And then the last 50 minutes we score a goal. Heck, we were one of the best teams a year ago at scoring out of the break. In fact, we had the most goals in the final 15 minutes and the first 50 minutes of a half of any team in MLS last year in that time period, that middle 30. So I look at it and I say it's very, very hard, again, in this league to sustain 90 full minutes because of that same inadequacy that I talked about earlier when it comes to the pitch, is that you have to kind of sacrifice quality at certain levels of the pitch. This is not the Premier League. You're not going to have 11 dudes on the field who are making $8 million plus. You're going to have some dudes who are there on $200,000, and you have to, I don't want to say hide them in plain view, but you have to make sure that their impact on the game is positive and more so hide the weak moments. And so that's where I think you maybe see some issues where it's not as consistent. You have some compression issues at times. You have some times where, it might not look as clinical. That there are very few teams that have 90 full minutes that you don't make a mistake. I would even go so far as to argue that in MLS, it's hard to see those teams. I would say even a team like LAFC. I mean, LAFC was the darling of the league coming into the last weekend, and look what happened to them against San Jose. They get blitzkrieg. Yeah. So it happens. It happens. Yeah. You're not going to go 34-0. You're not going to have moments where you're all crazy. And again, there are moments against other teams where we've looked incredibly strong. And I know a lot of it's happened against 10 men, but they don't commit fouls against dudes when they're not being threatened. Like aside from the Guillermo Miro red card, the other two ones that Charlotte FC has earned were because guys were in threatening spaces. They caused a foul, a red card offense in a threatening space. So there has to be some sort of credit given to Charlotte FC for that. And I think that's part of the game. And you can't negate or mark off Charlotte FC because they created that. Now the Bureau one was a singular moment at the halfway line and a non-threatening space, and was given. It was very similar to the one that was given against Derek Jones a couple of years ago against Columbus, where it was again in a non-dangerous area. It was a high challenge, and it was again confirmed on review. A little bit different scenario than the other two red cards that were given against Charlotte against Charlotte FC's opponents, but those other two were because there were threatening spaces, and that's what happens when you're a team that can show some quality and can show some threatening ability.
So I've got two more actually. Sorry, I have a late breaking question here that got added at the last second. I'll come back to here in a second. Really, please. So this one's from Chris, and he wants to talk about Tim Ream, and I'm gonna pretense this is that I'm a big Tim Ream and Fulham fan, but that's okay. So he wants to know: do you think Tim Ream will start for us after the World Cup break, or will he begin his retirement tour early and watch? So I know there's been some fans out there that are ready for that to happen. I'm not one of those, but it's okay. So I just want to get your perspective on it, though.
I think Tim Ream is the starting left center back for this team as long as he's healthy and wanting to do so. I think Dean has talked about Tim in a very positive aspect. Every time he seems to get pressed about it, he gets a positive word in about Tim. I actually talked with his center back mate and a couple of his U.S. international competitions, Chris Richards. And I asked him, what it means to have Tim Ream. And he's like, look, man, we all see the criticism that comes out with Tim Ream, but he's been a real help to a lot of those guys, particularly some of the younger guys who've been in the U.S. men's national team. And I know that some people will look at certain missteps from him and point them out and circle them and blame them all over social media. And he's become an unfortunate lightning rod for folks. And I just think that a lot of those things can be other people's faults too. Like Tim Ream is not the scapegoat or the automatic blame point for all the problems that happen with a team that he's on. And I think, again, he's still very, very good as a 1v1 defender. Do you want him chasing as much as sometimes it ends up happening? No, you don't. But I think he's still got the ability to be in front of a guy. He knows how to defend without fouling. And like you said, does a lot of great things in terms of ball distribution and leadership that I think go unnoticed by his critics. So I think it's his spot as long as he wants it. I tried to ask him before the season if he felt that this was his last season. He wouldn't answer it. So I feel like, again, he's 6 months younger than me. So how am I going to sit here and tell him what he can and can't do? I very much love having him on the team. And even Dean said it's very important for him to have a U.S. men's national team player on his roster. And he wants players who are going to, hold their hand over their heart during the national anthem and sing it and belt it out. Like that's a very, very important thing to him. And I wouldn't put it past if there is a U.S. men's national team player looking for a move, Charlotte not being aggressive. I wouldn't put it past Charlotte in being aggressive and going out and trying to get one of those guys to come over here. I'm not saying that it's going to happen. I don't know who it will be or at what position or that it's 100% actively going to happen, but I know that they very much want to be in the, hey, we want U.S. men's national team players to come over and play on this roster. That's definitely a thing they want.
Yeah. And Tim Ream also, his contract is up at the end of the season. He has that option for 2027 and a reminder that 2027 we have the sprint season, which ends in May. So, even
if those contracts will go through the half year into the next season.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, that's something.
So the people who are under contract for 2027 are under contract until the end of November.
Right.
So a lot of them.
Yeah. So, yeah. And so I could maybe see Tim, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how the World Cup goes, but if he's done at the end of the season, I totally get it. But I think he does absolutely can even serve a purpose if he's not starting to your point, Will, a veteran on the team. But go ahead, David.
Yeah, the only comment I'll just say, not to make this a U.S. men's soccer team podcast, is if there was someone better than Tim Ream for the men's national team, he would be playing. But that's a different conversation. But anyways,
it's also another thing that I would say too as well. I'm not going to doubt Mauricio in that end.
Yeah. So here's our late breaking question. This one's kind of a fun one for you, Willie P. So this is from Eric Hill. He says, if you can, not to put you on the spot, give us 2 or 3 famous calls or catchphrases that any announcer in any sport have made that you think, damn, that's good. Wish that I did that, or wish that was mine. So, and maybe one or two that you may think is ridiculous or out there. So is there anything that just stands out to you when you first hear that question?
So the ones that come to my mind, 88 World Series, Dodgers, Athletics, the Vin Scully call, the Kirk Gibson home run,
Yeah.
I think was incredibly pitch perfect. Pardon the pun. In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened. I think of Vern Lundquist on 16 with the Tiger shot, chipping in off of 16.
Oh, yeah.
In your life, have you seen anything like that? I also love from the college football world, only because I remember exactly where I was when I heard it. Rod Bramlett's call of the kick six, Auburn radio voice.
Oh,
who,
yeah, that's good.
God rest his soul. I know that Vern had that game too on TV. I was in a press box at Mizzou watching that game. They were about to play A&M. And it's the only time I've been in a press box where I've heard like incredible rambunctious cheering because the Mizzou game had not started yet. That was actually a pretty important game for us because if we won, we would have been playing in the SEC championship as the East Division champion. And so we were watching that game very intently, and it was running late on CBS, and we're all gathered around a TV watching it and seeing that moment. But then I heard Rod Bramlett's call on the broadcast afterwards, and just hearing his call, Auburn has won the Iron Bowl! Auburn has won the Iron Bowl in one of the most magnificent waves you've ever seen!
That's actually a pretty
We
good
thought a
impersonation.
miracle at Jordan Hare was amazing! So that's pretty cool. The one I actually have it up on my wall. You can't see it, but it was a very simple call. When the Islanders won the Stanley Cup in 1980, it was heading pass on the stick at Tonelli to Nystrom. He scores. Bob Nystrom scores the goal. The Islanders win the Stanley Cup. Just simple, plain, great. I thought, you know what? It was not a big inflection. That was a national call that was on there, and I had it basically in a verbal form. And then my wife, I might bring it up and show it to you just because it's the first goal we ever scored in that same written form. And it's, Bender approaches from the left side corner into the area, headed in, scores.
Yeah.
Adam Armour. And I know I've told you guys the story before, but we called that game on monitor. And I believe Fox did too. And Fox got the goal call wrong. They thought it was Carujo. And knowing that it was Armour, and because, you saw it was a mad scramble in there, and calling it as Armour, knowing that it was him, and getting that right. I mean, I still to this day, I feel so incredibly gratified and satisfied that was it. And that we got that call so very right. That was so very awesome just to see that. I know we didn't win the game. Jake Mulroney comes back and gets a heartbreaker of a goal at the end in that game. But the fact that we got that moment so right is one that I'll still take with me and say, you know what, we kicked the heck out of that one. I love that.
I'm pretty
every
sure.
Every time I see Adam, because he's always around, every time I see Adam, I just say, man, you're the one. You're the answer to the trivia question.
That's right.
I was just going to throw out there. I think Corey, is either you or Johnny that it was shown on that broadcast too during that call of jumping up and down in the stadium.
I think it was me, Johnny, and Swift were close to each other. We were all together, weren't we?
Yeah, we're all sitting together. Yeah.
As we're here, as we're seeing Johnny grab you guys like that. So it's great. So,
yeah, it's pretty sweet.
Sorry. Yeah, but thanks for answering that question on the spot there, Willie P. So hand over to you for the last question there.
Yeah,
Swift.
we got one last question, and I can't let you go without asking it because people will get very angry at me. So it's about Zaha. And
no.
So I guess the question is, like you've covered numerous sports, the Hornets, the Panthers. You have seen how contract negotiations play out. What do you make of this situation? Is this shocking to you at all, or is this kind of like, this is what happens with big time players?
I think it's what happens with big time players, and I actually I applaud Wilf for appearing that it doesn't affect his play on the field. Like it hasn't affected him adversely, and he has been an incredible professional. I think we've asked Dean multiple times about it since the season started, and Dean said there's absolutely no drop off about it. We don't talk about it. The players don't talk to him about it. It all takes place again in the boardroom upstairs.
Yeah.
I think there's a genuine desire for this club to re-sign Wilfred Zaha. I do. I think there's a genuine desire for Wilfred Zaha to re-sign with this club. I think his family loves it here. I think he loves it here. I also don't think you would see the team posting as eloquently about his movements on the field and the moments that he's provided for this team if they didn't have every intention of re-signing him. I mean, they put him in all their marketing stuff before the season. You do that for a guy you know you're going to have half a year? No. So I think they genuinely want to have him back. And I don't like the way that the discourse has gone because people are saying, oh, you don't really respect what he brings to the table. You don't do this, you don't do that. And I don't think it's very fair. I think it's premature to make those kind of presumptions. I think the team very much knows what he brings to the table. I will say again, we'll be 34 in November. There is that part of it. And I think there's a definite thing to be said in that, how long do you want to hold on to somebody and what is the line of demarcation of when you see the productivity start to dip? Now, it hasn't yet for Wilf.
Right.
We can all say that it hasn't. He's providing assists. He's providing goals. He is a very integral player of this squad today. Father Time is undefeated. You wonder when that will start to dip and whether Charlotte wants to pay a premium on that dip, how comfortable they are doing it. I also think a lot of it has to do with what they do with the other DP spot in the summer. Liel Abada is on that position right now.
Yeah.
I think conventional wisdom would dictate that perhaps he's not in that position after the World Cup. And it comes down to whether Charlotte feels if they can get one DP that replaces Liel Abada, if that's the direction they want to go in, or if they only get one DP, if they can get a second DP. And the other part of this too is, where do you feel like you can get that DP? Do you want to get another winger? Do you want to get a box-to-box 8? Do you want to get a different position? Maybe the heir apparent to Ashley Westwood? I don't know. Like there's a bunch of different scenarios that they can happen. And if the organization has told you one thing over the course of this year, they have told you that this summer is incredibly integral and transformative when it comes to player movement. There'll be more players moved during this summer than any year that MLS has been in existence because of the World Cup.
Right.
And because of the fact that instead of having an 8 to 10 game ramp up after the summer transfer window opens, you're going to have 19. So you're going to have a wider opportunity to make a big impact on your roster by making a move. Teams will be more inclined to spend that money, and players, seeing the way the lifestyle is over here in America, hopefully will be attracted to playing here. The league is in a better position now than it ever has been to attract players. There are more players over here who are making an impact than there ever have been, who are world-class players on the world stage. Messi, Timo Werner, Tomas Mueller, Heung-min Son, and more to come. So pardon me for thinking that it's possible that all these things can be true. I think you can have Wilfred Zaha on a team where you add another player. I think you can definitely see if you want to get 2 DPs, would that be the worst thing in the world if you brought in somebody else of a name value? I don't want to lose Wilfred Zaha. I think he's a fantastic player. I think on vibes alone, he's great to bring around and have around. I want them to keep Wilfred Zaha. I love calling his name every Saturday and Wednesday. I love seeing him score goals for Charlotte FC. But I also know that the realities that exist with what's going on in the summer as well. So I think it's a tricky spot for the club to be in. I think, again, it's a unique scenario. And I also understand, too, that these are things that they continue to work on. And it's nothing is final. Nothing is set in stone yet. And quite frankly, I wouldn't be shocked either way. If I just come out and say it the way it is, I would not be shocked if he stays. I would not be shocked if he goes. I hope he stays.
Yeah.
I hope it's, a situation where you're going and only getting another DP potentially in the offseason. If that's the direction they plan on going on, it's going to be the easiest way to transform your roster by getting a DP. But I know there's going to be plenty of opportunity to do that. And I think it's something that makes the summer all that much intriguing. And I also think, not to be overly critical of the way some fans talk about the club, but people look at the front office as if they've not gotten any victories in player acquisition. Like we talk about Kalina, we talk about Pep Biel, like those guys still exist, right? Like and it feels like they only talk about the guys who they don't like and things of that nature.
Or Zaha himself. I mean, like that's
or Zaha himself.
Like I don't know. It's pretty funny. You said the word tricky. And I think that's right, because like right now, I will speak for myself. Like having Abada on a DP spot is not great for me. So if you sign Zaha to a longer term deal, by the time he's done, he is 36 years old. And he's going to be taking up a DP spot. Is that what you want long term? He'll be. So that's a tricky spot. And
again, I don't know what each side without knowing what each side wants. Like, sure. I don't know if Zaha's wanting a short-term contract. I don't know if he's wanting a long-term contract.
Yeah.
I don't know if Charlotte FC is wanting him to be on a shorter-term deal, maybe to kick the can down the road a little bit, right. Or if they want to put him on a long-term deal and secure him and he's not comfortable with that. I don't know. I don't know the state of play when it comes to that. Believe me, I've tried to knock down Zoran's door and, bribe him with a bottle of bourbon and say, hey, what's going on? He won't tell you. He's a fantastic executive in that fact, and that he keeps a lot of those things close to the vest, as he should.
Yeah.
And I know people are going to get angry about Zaha's wife said this, and Charlotte's going after Raheem Sterling. I don't believe any of that.
Yeah. Right.
I think it's all chatter. I think this is all just part of the dance. And look, it's part of the dance involving yourself with high profile players.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
And I know we've had some unfortunate misses, like the Calvin Stanks thing happened. It sucked. But you know what? He hasn't necessarily done anything really since then. And there've been other players who've, been almosts and things of that nature. I understand those things are part of Zoran's record too, but Zoran's also got a couple of wins. I mean, Patrick Adjaman was a find by this organization. And I know that maybe he didn't play as long here as people would have wanted him to, but selling a player that you got in the MLS Super Draft for $8 million is an incredible bit of business. Mm-hmm. It's the kind of thing that MLS should be promoting more, quite frankly, and they don't get nearly enough love for. Yeah. Getting Adilson Malanda for a song. They got Malanda for a song and sold him for $8 million.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and I know that people will look at that and say that that we don't care what the money comes in. We want to see that money reinvested. Where is that money being reinvested? That's where the summer comes in. That money will get spent. Yeah. It's not burning a hole in the pocket. That money will get spent this summer.
Yeah. Well,
hopefully on corn dogs and beer at the stadium.
That'd be great.
Yeah. On a player asset, Gussler.
There you go. There you go.
One can dream, though.
Had to end the show on that note.
Yeah. Well, that's all the questions we've got. Willie, thank you so much for taking the time to come back on the show. We will try our best to not make it as long.
This is like a 2-hour podcast. Like how long did we go, guys?
I love Willie. Willie's like, yeah, we'll go about 30 minutes. I was like, woo, yeah, no, we'll go longer than that. I don't remember last time.
You guys forgot who the hell we were dealing with. I'm sorry. Yeah,
no, that's all right. I think this was great. I think people like your perspective and your knowledge, and they probably get tired of hearing us. So it's good to have someone else on the show. So, but yeah, we'll wrap up there, guys. Willie, thank you so much. I appreciate it. If you have anything else, feel free to chime in. But yeah, thanks for tuning in.
No, I just love being with you guys. Love all our fans. I my heart is warmed every time I look over and see Peppa's and hear the crowd and the jumping up and down and the constant voice. you guys were in the rain game. I mean, forget about it. I had no idea where you guys found the energy in the rain game. I was very into that. I felt like you guys were even strengthened by that. I know that's not all you necessarily, Swifty, but because you sit in those club seats, your cushy club seats. It's
That's right.
okay though.
There you go. That's it. Yep.
That's so
But
true.
I know that plenty of those who listen to this podcast are part of that in the Royal family, and we genuinely appreciate the support, and I hope we are moving towards a product that you can continue to be proud of, and I hope you are proud of the product now after a couple of big victories, and hopefully we can keep it going.
That's right. All right, guys. Well, that'll do it for this show. Thanks for tuning in. Join us on our Discord. It's where we chat about the hard-hitting topics like corn dogs and, actual soccer stuff. So, but that's it, guys. Thank you so much for joining us.